Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. Want to improve your organization's customer service? Looking for insider tips to knock your customer socks off? Then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Yannick Grant.
Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. On today's episode, our guest is Jason Pfeiffer. Jason is the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur magazine, a non-stop optimism machine, and a widely recognized authority on business and how people navigate change. He is the author of the best-selling book, Build for Tomorrow, a startup advisor and host of the podcast Help Wanted and Problem Solvers. LinkedIn named him a top voice in entrepreneurship. Jason has also had a decades-long career in national media, which included working as an editor at men's health fast company Maxim and Boston Magazine, and writing about business and technology for the Washington Post, Slate, New York Magazine, and others. So without further delay, sit back, plug your earphones in, and let's jump right into this conversation with Jason. Welcome, Jason.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Perfect. We always like to give our guests an opportunity to just share in their own words a little bit about their journey and how they got from where they were to where they are today. So could you share that with us?
Oh, sure. Well, in brief, I started in media. I was a community newspaper reporter fresh out of college. Eventually, I got into magazines. I moved to New York City to work for Men's Health magazine, pretty different from Entrepreneur, and bounced around to a lot of different national magazines until I got to Entrepreneur. And at first, I really treated Entrepreneur like a media project. My job was to do what I had done everywhere else, which was to be an editor and to tell great stories and to think about the media brand. But over time, two things happened. Number one is that people, because of the title, editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur magazine, they started to treat me as an authority in entrepreneurship, which frankly I was uncomfortable with for a while because my background was in media, until I came to realize that so much of business is not about the fundamentals of business, but it's really about the fundamentals of human thinking and logic and reinvention and the kinds of things that I had put myself through in my own career. And then look, I think that we all have to recognize what our incredible skill is, and it's going to be different for everybody. My belief is that every human being has the same fundamental skill, and that is pattern recognition. The difference among us is that some of us are better at recognizing different kinds of patterns, right? And so my pattern is how people think and how people tell stories and how people understand the world. And I came to realize that by spending an immense amount of time with entrepreneurs, I was starting to absorb their way of thinking, starting to act like them, starting to launch my own businesses, starting to advise startups, and that I could lean into telling their stories, processing their insights, in a way that would be incredibly useful for other entrepreneurs. And that has led me to the career that I have now.
All right, perfect. So I was lucky enough to actually read your article in Entrepreneur magazine. I think it was the February issue that I purchased when I was traveling, How Failure Can Feel Good. And it really intrigued me. So I reached out to you on LinkedIn, and graciously you accepted my request. And here we are today having you on our podcast. So amazing. So in your bio, it was also mentioned that you recently published a book. That would have been September of 2022, correct?
Yeah, possibly 2021. No, 2022. Yes. After a while, you forget when things come out. Yes, you're correct.
So Build for Tomorrow, a book that focuses on startup advisory. And I just kind of want you to take a little time to share with our listeners, what the book is about, who is the book targeted towards, and how do you believe the book is, has been helping others in their different careers and businesses?
Oh, sure. So Build for Tomorrow is a book for anybody who's going through change, who, particularly going through any kind of career change, though I've heard from a lot of readers that it applied well to personal changes as well. And the book is rooted in this philosophy that I've developed, which is that when I meet the most successful leaders and entrepreneurs, I find that they have all developed a unique personal relationship with change. They understand who they are in times of change. They understand how change can impact them in a positive way. And that unique relationship with change enables them to grow and build in ways that others can't. And I wanted to write a book that distilled the experiences and the wisdom of people who have successfully navigated change and help others with a roadmap for how to do it too. I think that is just simply the most important thing that any entrepreneur can do, is to be adaptable, to recognize that the things that are changing around them are great opportunities, and then to understand how to systematically approach that. And that's the book that I wrote. And I've had really tremendous feedback from it. It's really gratifying.
Awesome. Now, the book focuses on 4 phases, right, of this change.
Mm-hmm.
The first is the panic, then you have the adaptation, and the new normal, and then that phase where, we're never going back, right? We wouldn't go
Right.
back.
Yes.
So could you just elaborate just a little bit, maybe give an example of each, just to kind of cement that information across to our listeners?
Oh, sure. So I will, it's funny. I don't know why after every question I've been saying, oh, sure. That's something I've always noticed in people who I interview. Sometimes they have the same words that come out of their mouth when they start an answer. I'm saying that for anybody who's in the position of being interviewed to like watch for that, because it's actually really annoying. So I'm going to stop doing it now. But so yes, so I found that everybody goes through change in the same 4 phases, and you listed them out: panic, adaptation, new normal, wouldn't go back. Let's focus on panic and wouldn't go back. Panic is something I think look, when you're panicked, when you're feeling that. You maybe are feeling that right now as I'm talking, because something massive has changed in your work, because you feel like your industry is shifting underneath you. Who knows? And the reason why we panic is because decades of psychological research have confirmed what's called loss aversion theory. Loss aversion theory is the recognition that our human brains are programmed to protect against loss more than to seek gain. So when something changes in our lives or in our work, the first thing that we do is we identify the things that we're comfortable and familiar with, and then we start to think about how we're going to lose them. We're equating change with loss. And then we start to extrapolate it. Well, because I've lost this thing, I'm going to lose that thing. Because I lost that thing, I'm going to lose that other thing. Now everything starts to feel like it's disappearing. Now we are panicking. But you can't do that forever. You can't panic forever. It's too exhausting. Eventually, you start to look around and say, well, what do I have to work with? We get to adaptation. We start to build a new normal, a new foundation, something comfortable and familiar again, a new normal. And then we get to wouldn't go back, that moment where we say, I have something so new and valuable that I wouldn't want to go back to a time before I had it. I can give you examples of that, but the pattern that I'm seeing is that people are often forced into, or sometimes are proactively making changes that force them to reconsider the fundamentals of the work that they do. And what they discover is that the way in which they were working before, or the thing that they were doing, or the way that they were delivering value to their clients or their customers, that wasn't the only way to do it. They thought that it was, but it wasn't. And in fact, it was a lesser version of a better way to do it that had never been explored, because oftentimes people don't feel incentivized to scrap something that's working or that's sort of working and take the risk of figuring out how to build something better. But when change comes along, when you are disrupted, when you're forced to react to the things that are shifting around you, you start to ask yourself some really fundamental questions about whether or not the things that you thought wouldn't work maybe are worth trying. And some of those are going to become the best opportunities for you going forward.
All right. So change. I remember over the years, even going to university and starting in my working life and starting a business, I've always heard the phrase that change is constant. And I haven't engaged in the book. I did download it on Audible and I've started listening to it, but I haven't completed it as yet. But what your 4 phases reminded me of was that change is constant. So regardless of a pandemic emerging across the world, or kids coming into the play, or getting new employees, like change is constant. We're constantly going through change in different aspects of our lives. So that your phase is definitely reminding me of that.
And that's something that you can operationalize. So the idea that change is constant is a familiar one for many people. But I think often you hear that and you don't know what to do with it. Okay,
Yeah.
change is constant. So what? Here's a starting point. What would happen if you made decisions today based on the knowledge that the thing that you're working on now will have to change tomorrow? What decisions would you make when you know that? It starts to shift the way in which you work. You start to, for example, do a thing that I call change before you must, where you start to make decisions that are hard today because they will benefit you when things change tomorrow. A story that I love to tell, I won't tell it in full here because it takes a while, but you can find it in the book, is of a brewer, a guy who started a beer brewery in Delaware named Sam. His company is called Dogfish. And he had a runaway hit product in a beer called 60-Minute IPA. People loved this beer. It was on track to become 75 to 80% of all sales of his company. And he artificially limited supply. So this thing was on track to become 75 to 80% of all sales of Dogfish. He capped that at 50%. And that meant that people were furious at him. You know, restaurants couldn't get his beer stocked, bars couldn't get his beer stocked. And I said, Sam, why would you do that? Why would you limit sales of your best-selling product? And the answer that he gave me was because tastes change. And he knew that if he allowed this one beer to be a runaway hit so that everybody who ever went into a bar or a restaurant encountered just this beer of his, just this one, 60-Minute IPA. Well, then at some point, IPAs, India Pale Ale, popular bitter style of beer, it's going to become less popular than it was at that one moment. And if people's impressions of his company were shaped by one beer, by an IPA, then he was going to be known as a hot IPA brand. And that's fine until tastes change. They will change, at which point he won't be a hot IPA brand. He will be an old brand. He'll be a dead brand. Mm-hmm. And so he wanted to do something that was painful today for the benefit of tomorrow, anticipating that change will come. And that is how he, the payoff for the story is amazing, which is that Sam limited sales of his best-selling beer. When people would order it, he would try to get them to buy or stock or serve other styles of beer that he made. And as a result, he shaped perception of his company, Dogfish, not as a hot IPA brand, but as an innovative brand. And what you can do with an innovative brand is you can sell it for $300 million, which is exactly what he did.
Wow.
That's not something you could have done if he had just thought about how to profit today, how to only succeed based on what was working today. That's what it means to build the reality of constant change into the decisions that you make today. Know that they will require change tomorrow. So how can you anticipate that and be proactive about it?
Brilliant. I love that story, Jason. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
All right. Now, Jason, as a editor of Entrepreneur magazine, I'm sure that you interface with a lot of CEOs and a lot of business leaders across different industries across the world. And so I wanted, based on your expert opinion and your exposure to persons of this nature, what do you believe are maybe three, it's a kind of a generic question, but, I like to hear from the subject matter experts.
Sure.
Three, let's say, character traits that you found has to really be intrinsic to organizations or persons who lead organizations to help them really be customer centric, because we're all about navigating the customer experience. And the reality is, if you don't have the right people doing the things that your customers want and creating value, you're not going to have a successful business. And if your customers don't feel like they're getting value and they choose to, do business with your competition or not do business with you at all, over time, you'll not have a successful business. So it's twofold. Yeah. And you want that person who can navigate the personalities and navigate, as you said, the change and the many different things that will come forth. What would you say are the three character traits that you think someone like that would need?
Let's see if I can organize my thoughts into three like that.
No problem.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind was a conversation that I had with this guy, Matt, who at the time was the president of Reebok, Reebok, the athletic wear company. And he told me that this was the first time I had heard this phrase that then I started hearing everywhere, which was customer obsession. He said, we're really upset, we're completely customer obsessed at Reebok, and we want to understand them and we want to understand their needs. And I've heard that from a lot of people, but I had never heard the next thing that he told me, which was this metaphor that he uses. He says, look, we are in a moment in business where quality is assumed, where if you, let's say, wanted to start a scissor company making scissors, you could not advertise yourself as the sharpest scissors, because every scissors is the sharpest scissors, right? Like it's easy enough now to manufacture scissors that every scissors is the sharpest scissors. So if you want to be successful selling scissors, you can't lean on quality alone. Quality has to be table stakes. Quality is what people take for granted. It's what they expect. The next place that you need to go is, who exactly are you serving, and how do you relate to them? How do you tell a story that makes them proud to use your scissors, that makes them feel like when they use their scissors, they're exploring a version of themselves? That's what it means to be customer obsessed, is to understand the way in which your customer thinks, to the degree to which you can tell your story in a way that relates directly to them. Now, I'm not telling you something that you don't know based on serving customers, but that scissors metaphor really stuck with me, because I think a lot of people, their starting point is, well, because I make the best ... But if you take that away from yourself and you say, being the best at whatever is not enough, because quality by itself doesn't sell, then what else am I doing here? I have a friend, I'll make this kind of point number 2, is I have a friend, her name is Rochelle DeVoe, and she is a consumer insights research specialist and is brilliant at understanding consumer psychology, and has taught me a lot. But the framework that she shared with me, that again has really stuck with me the most, is and so much so that I actually have it on my desktop, and I'm looking at it right now to read you from Rochelle's thing. So she says, look, if you want to understand how to relate to customers, then you need to fill out the following sentence. When context, I want solution so that benefit. When context, I want solutions so that benefit, from the perspective of the consumer. So give you an example that she uses from a compression sock company, a company that makes, kind of tight socks for people who have foot pain. So she says, all right, when context, I want solutions so that benefit. When context, when my feet hurt from standing all day, it's the context in which there's a need for a solution. I want solution. I want to feel comfortable while still looking cute. Her example is a company that makes compression socks for women. So that's something that they are concerned with. So that benefit, so that I can do my job, be present for my family, enjoy my life while not standing out because of my foot pain. Okay. What's so important about understanding this, when context, I want solutions so that benefit, is that most entrepreneurs get stuck at solution. They talk about the solution that they have. I've made compression socks. I've made compression socks for when your feet hurt. But the real conversion, the real connection to the audience, comes at the benefit. It comes at being able to articulate the value that your customer is going to get from using your solution. Customers don't care about solutions, right? Nobody wakes up in the morning and they're like, I want compression socks. No, what they think is, I want to do my job and be present for my family and enjoy my life. That's what they want. So how do you understand the benefits that they want enough that you can have a conversation with them that is benefit oriented? Because that is where you win. And, Rochelle suggests the way to do this is to be constantly in touch with and surveying your consumer so that you understand how they think and how they talk and the language that they use. And I find that perspective to be incredibly powerful. So if we're at, we're making a list here. So, number 1, I think, is to be customer obsessed to the point where you recognize that quality itself is not going to connect to your customer. Mm-hmm. Point number 2 is to be benefit oriented, to understand your consumer at a level that is deep enough that they can articulate the benefit of that consumer, the benefit that consumer is seeking. And, if I had to come up with a third one, qualities of leaders who are, customer centric, I'd say that there is a level of inefficiency that leaders are willing to tolerate to learn from their customers. A conversation that always stuck with me is a woman who had started, I can't remember the name of the company, but it was a paint company. She makes like really cool paint colors, and it had been quite successful. And the company has grown. It's actually been acquired. She's still running it. She has a large team. She still is in her brand's Instagram DMs every day, corresponding with customers. If somebody DMs that brand on Instagram, the CEO responds, and that is deeply inefficient. But it has helped her stay in touch with her consumer in a way that she feels she would lose if she retracted from that and she just focused on, all the operations of the business. She wants to be in touch in a way that is inefficient. She has a tolerance for inefficiency because that is the thing that is ultimately enabling her to understand her customers' needs today and where those shifts are tomorrow.
Wow, that's amazing. A CEO that's in the DMs. That's brilliant.
It's great, isn't it? I love it.
I love it too. All right, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing those 3 traits, Jason. Much appreciated. Now, could you share with our listeners what's the one online resource, tool, website, or app that you absolutely can't live without in your business?
Oh, well, these days, I have been absolutely loving Fathom. So Fathom is you can get it at fathom.video, and Fathom is a AI note-taking tool. I have it in all of my calls and meetings now. And it just does a great job of contextually summarizing what was said. It provides a transcript. It's not a perfect transcript, but it's close enough so that you can go back and find what somebody said, and then it's very searchable. So I found this to be an excellent way of passively collecting all the information that is being shared and discussed, so that I have now a kind of catalog of it and an easy way to go back and find it. I strongly suggest just having something like this running in the background of all your meetings now. So again, it's just fathom.video is the company's website.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. Can you also share with us what's the one thing that's going on in your life right now that you're really excited about? Either something you're working on to develop yourself or your people.
I've been working on a newsletter for the last year. It's called One Thing Better. And the tagline that I have for it is each week, one way to be more successful and satisfied at work and build a career or company that you love. And each week is me sharing a strategy. Usually it's a story that articulates it, and then an exercise that people can use to think more adaptively, to be more open-minded, to find opportunities that in places you're not looking, to just feel better about work. My wife refers to this newsletter as work therapy. And I've been just incredibly gratified by the response that I'm getting to this newsletter. It pretty quickly grew to 50,000 subscribers. And I just get these emails from people telling me that they print out my emails and they keep them on their desk to read regularly, or they forward it to their friends who are struggling with something. I'm just so excited to have created something that can have that kind of personal connection. If you want to check it out, it's at onethingbetter.email. That's the web address, onethingbetter.email. And I just think there's a lot of potential in exploring the newsletter space and in creating things that are both connecting with people on a business but personal level as well. That's a space I really like to live in. So I've been excited to be building that and to see where it goes.
All right, perfect. So we'll definitely have the link to the newsletter in the show notes of this episode. And I imagine once they subscribe, they can have access to previous newsletters that were published, correct?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, as soon as you go to that website, you'll see the back catalog.
All right. Okay, Jason. So our listeners would have tapped into this episode and they're quite intrigued with you and your journey, and they would like to connect with you online. Where can they find you online?
Well, they can find me. One thing, really, the newsletter is the strongest place to go. So onethingbetter.email. But I also spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, which is where I believe you and I connected. So you can find me there as well. Just search for my name and find me on LinkedIn.
All right, perfect. Now, before we wrap our episodes up, we always like to ask our guests, do you have a quote or a saying that during times of adversity or challenge, you'll tend to revert to this quote? If for any reason you get derailed or you get off track, the quote kind of helps to get you back on track. Do you have one of those?
Yeah, I'm not big on motivational quotes, so I don't get driven that way, but I've had a lot of people say really impressive things to me that stick with me. One of them came from Malcolm Gladwell, who is a best-selling author and podcaster and so on. And he had said we were talking about work and so on, and he had said this line to me, which I loved, which was, self-conceptions are powerfully limiting. That if the idea being that if you have too narrow a vision of yourself, then you will limit all the opportunities that could come your way that don't fit that narrow definition of self. So self-conceptions are powerfully limiting. And that is something I think about a lot as I pursue things that take me out of my earlier conceptions of myself.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, Jason, we would just want to extend our deepest gratitude to you for taking time out of your very busy schedule and hopping on this podcast with us today, talking about your best-selling book, Build for Tomorrow, and the 4 phases that are connected to that book, also giving us, 3 of the strong character traits that you believe will help leaders to really build an organization that will not just provide value for their customers, but also for their employees. So it can be a win-win on both ends. And, the insights, the knowledge, the experiences that you've shared with us today, the stories, they were just extremely insightful. And I just want to say thank you so much.
Oh, hey, thank you. I really appreciate it. Where, by the way, it's audiobook, so however you prefer to read books. And thanks for having me. I really appreciate this great conversation.
Amazing. Just want to remind our listeners, you can feel free to follow us on Facebook in our private Facebook group community, Navigating the Customer Experience Community, and follow us on X at NavigatingCX. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant. We also have a new book available on Amazon, The ABCs of a Fantastic Customer Experience. It's available in ebook and paperback. So if you want to increase revenue in your organization, build a stronger service culture, and create employees or develop employees who are really mastering service delivery in your business, you need to grab a copy of this book. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant.
Thanks for listening. For more awesome resources to take your customer service game to another level, head over to navigatingthecustomerexperience.com. See you next time.